Thank you for downloading this Council on Foreign Relations video. CFR is an independent national membership organization and nonpartisan research center. For more information, please visit us online at cfr.org.
I want to welcome all of you here. Buongiorno, in honor of our guest. We are, I think, here talking about a very important and timely topic. A few rules of engagement in advance that I need to go over with all of us here. This particular meeting is being sponsored by our corporate program here at the Council. And we have the usual obligatory warning to turn off your cell phones and Blackberries or put them in vibrate. Otherwise, our fleet of black helicopters that we maintain here at the Council is launched and somebody comes down and wrestles it from you. All right, so we'll go with that. After we have this initial conversation, we're then going to do a Q&A, drawing all of you, and we ask that when we engage in that, that you tell us who you are and what your affiliation is. So let me begin and first introduce our guests, which we're so delighted to have here, maybe with a little bit of jet lag on our rainy day here, but Massimo Sarmi is the Chief Executive Officer of the Poste Italiane, where he's been in that post since May of 2002. Prior to that, he was involved in the telecommunications industry for many, many years. He has an electronic engineering background, which is very helpful for the very technical issues we have here, and obviously has a tremendous amount of leadership experience, in part garnered from some time in the Air Force in the early part of his career. And you have his impressive resume, and we're so honored to have him here today. In framing what we're, I think, talking about, and why I think the approach that Poste Italiane is taking is so important. You know, at its heart, I think if there's one lesson that we can draw from the financial market meltdown last year, is that global networks require trust for users to want to use them. And if the networks evolve in such a way that the risk management tools associated with them don't keep pace, then you end up in situations when people become spooked, some threat materializes or some vulnerability is exposed, for folks to opt out of the system. And the financial market's equivalent, put the money under the mattress. The challenge here is clearly when we have these networks that increasingly sprawl across jurisdictions, that have growing levels of complexities and from the interdependencies that they often hold, is to ensure that the risk management tools are evolving side by side with them. But clearly, accomplishing that requires two very unnatural acts. First, government has to cooperate with the private sector. Secondly, governments have to cooperate with each other. Those two things do not happen spontaneously, at least in my experience. I'm sure it's shared with most everybody in this room. And the challenge here when we're managing something of a global scale is you not only have to do this episodically, you have to do it as an ongoing enterprise. What has been missing, I think, so much in the area of cyber is figuring out a way in which one can do that. And I know that's in part why Mr. Sarmi is here today, is to talk a little bit about the leadership that the Poste Italiane is trying to take to this problem. And again, we're very delighted to have you, sir. So let's begin by perhaps you're offering some comments here for us to mull over, and then we'll come back to you with questions, okay? Thank you, sir.
Oh, thanks a lot. I'm really honored to be here, of course, and if you can hear, I have a strong Roman accent and my English is not the best one. But again, being Roman and coming from Rome, an ancient city, is natural for me to make a quick jump in the past to remind you how efficient and secure were communication services during the Roman Empire. In fact, according to ancient documents, it took only 24 hours to have a letter cover a distance of 27 no, 270 kilometers in one day. And what's fun, that we have to wait till the beginning of 19th century to have such a performance reproduced. At the beginning of the 19th century, many governments, I'd say many wise governments, established and committed postal operators to offer basic financial services and, of course, communication service. In that very moment, the most modern technology available was the telegraph, committed to the postal operators, which represents the first digital data transmission. And it is not a coincidence that more than 1 century and a half later, while we are convinced that the most widest communication means is represented by data transmission, in my opinion, postal operators are naturally minded into offering secure communication services even in the electronic way. In fact, if you consider the other players, for instance, the telcos operators, they are committed into offering a bandwidth, quality of services, but surely security and privacy are not their main goal. So, my opinion is for the internet service providers who are offering a limited storage for receiving communication or offering connectivity, while the application service providers, for Google, Amazon, eBay, are fully concentrated into vertical services offering a limited and fragmented protection. Well, I think that but let me, at the same time, we are aware that we are running the most powerful ICT infrastructure ever existed. And at the same time, we are surfing in the most dangerous water we can ever imagine. Consider that hackers, mythomanoes, spy terrorists, criminals, not forgetting betrayed lovers, have a tremendous tool for cooperating and trying to violate even the most protected infrastructure. And this kind of threat is so rapidly growing that it is necessary to take care urgently of that. But who can take care of all that? Of course, I am not so fully objective, but I think that postal operators are naturally minded, and we, as Poste Italiane, considering our nature, our mission, and the fact that we are offering a so wide variety of communication, logistics, financial services, each one has a corresponding one in the electronic way. And moreover, we are taking part to the most important e-government projects. And then we are offering our clients a fully multi-channel approach. I mean that our clients can access postal services not only in the post office, but via internet, by phone, dialing the remote control of the TV set. And I'd say cherry on the pie to use. We are the first mobile operator in the world as Poste Italiane to offer its currently 1,300,000 clients secure payments via mobile, thanks to a very modern technology based on an exclusive SIM card. All in all, our clients are generating more than 30 million transactions per day. We are monitoring and managing in real time. Real time is really a key word for us, as it is secure data storage. Because imagine one out of our 30 million payment cards issued is attacked, in real time we are able to detect and to react to save clients' data and, of course, his money. That thanks to a unique control system, which currently in Rome, after St. Peter's and Colosseum, represents one of the most visited sites. I'm not joking, but of course you should come along and take a look to it. But of course we are fully aware that we can do all by ourselves because of the globality of the net. the cooperation is needed, and considering the fact that now internet is unique but made of millions of networks, generally owned by private sectors and independently managed. And what's more, what seemed at the beginning an advantage as anonymity, now it reveals as a real Achilles heel. And then, to cover these issues, what we did up to now. At the beginning of this year, we started working to a new form of partnership involving organizations who share our same problems. We called it a mega community for cybersecurity. And one of our first initiatives was to set up a European electronic crime task force whose members are Poste Italiane, of course, the Italian state police, and I'm honored to say the US Secret Service. We were admitted to take part to the activities of the New York Electronic Crime Task Force. At the same time, we were committed by the Universal Postal Union, which is the United Nations agency which groups all the postal operators in the world, to work at the creation of a top-level domain in the internet named .post. And we are currently working and writing the technical specification for the e-postal services which we are going to offer to governments, to private sectors, to citizens, having a unique characteristic, the full interoperability worldwide. Then, coming to summarize and coming towards the conclusion, our main goals for the near future are to be focused into the following areas. We want to support the definition of international policies. As to this, tomorrow I'll be in Washington to sign an agreement with the George Mason University School of Law. We want naturally to promote international cooperation, to try to better coordinate applied research, and naturally to improve education. We need technicians, and not only, but managers with this specific skill. What we are offering and will offer is our continuously growing capability, operational capability in the management of what is currently the biggest service provisioning system of our country. It's really a living lab we offer to the researcher of the international community. Well, coming really to the conclusion, I think that naturally we are close to our clients. We get in touch with millions of them every day, and we want to be considered, even in the internet era, the trusted third party which ensures secure communication, logistic, and financial electronic services. Thanks.
All right.
I hope I didn't ruin your digestion.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that wonderful overview. I wonder if you might share with us at the start your experience advancing this concept. What have been the biggest barriers? What have been the biggest challenges with getting progress on this important initiative?
I think even if we manage such a variety of contents, because it's difficult to have a company which is passing from logistics to payments. We are imagine the first retail bank in Italy, even if we have not a banking license. It seems strange, but we are allowed to offer financial services, but we can't offer credit risk. And at the same time, we are number one in terms of current accounts opened. We are number one in Europe in the area of the prepaid cards. And despite of the fact that internally we have to put together all this kind of different culture, externally we are submitted, as you can imagine, to the huge the biggest variety of authorities you can imagine. We have, because running telecommunication, we have the authority of the communication. Running financial services, we have both in Italy there are at least three or four, one apart of the most general antitrust, which are pushing us to be effective and precise in the flow of our activity, our services. So the biggest difficulty is expanding this concept externally to put together at least the major players which can influence in that very specific case the use of the internet.
From where you got started when you first arrived at your position in 2002 to where we are today in 2009, what is your sense of the threat for the exploitation of these networks by the criminals and potentially even the targeting of these networks in the terms of a form of warfare, which obviously is starting to get some higher profile?
It is fun, but the more we were able to modernize our infrastructure, the more we were realized that we were open to risk. Because currently, I think that the majority of us is aware of the fact that if there is a critical infrastructure, we have to protect it. And as to this, we are blocking in 1 month's time, just to give you the sense of the figures, millions of viruses and hundreds of thousands of daily spam mails and whatever you can imagine. But there is another consideration. If you are an operator, as we are, open to everybody every day with currently 14,000 outlets where our clients are continuously accessing the services which are managed through our ICT infrastructure. It's a double difficulty to have the service running and to protect it in the meanwhile. Because one thing is to raise a barrier when you want to protect your infrastructure, but at the same time you are isolated from the external. We can't afford to isolate our post offices where, just to give you the figures, we are collecting more than 300 billion euros of savings from the Italians, just to give you the idea and some figures. Then to proceed in such a consideration, I noticed that at a certain point we were able, not having the license for assuming credit risk, to issue prepaid cards. It came from probably from my previous experience in mobile services. And we realized that these prepaid cards worked. As to this, in less than 5-6 years, we can count over roughly 6 million prepaid cards issued and working. But at the origin, I thought, while buying something in the internet, I noticed that even normal people, not particularly skilled or trained, had some doubts whether giving the codes of his credit cards, while they were very, very open and free to use the prepaid cards, because in the worst case they would have lost, let me say, it is you have to consider a prepaid card as a pure electronic money. So you have $200 or 200 euros in the prepaid card. They use it for small expenses. And at the beginning we were not attacked at all. Now, in 2-3 years' time, we realized that also our prepaid cards are attacked with a very sophisticated technique, in the sense that it is not the prepaid card, but it's the fact that the owner of a current account whose identity was stolen, he used as a mean to load some other prepaid cards, open in that very moment from these brilliant inventors, I'd say criminals, to transfer the money from a current account to the credit cards. So I realize that this is only an example, but to show you how these gangs, criminal gangs, are fully organized. Consider that, if I am not mistaken, our criminal champion now, the scene is the following. Somebody, throughout a phishing mechanism, is stealing a poor client's ID. Then there is another group of people who's accessing various post offices for opening prepaid cards. And then somebody else is moving money from the current account of the poor guy to these prepaid cards. Tell you how much time our best practice needed to put in place this mechanism. 50 seconds.
Wow.
So luckily it's not a word of champions, but in any case we have to be really worried and to pay the utmost attention to these, let me say, more sophisticated events which are occurring, I underline, in the area of services. It's not a question of protecting an infrastructure, but protecting the clients while he's accessing normal services.
Very good. I'm struck when you were saying the inherent tension between the protection mindset to sort of lock things down, build walls, and providing a service, which means you must make it convenient and open. That may also be a bit of a challenge in terms of how we're managing this threat. The instinct of law enforcement and certainly our defense community is to classify things, is to keep the cards close to your chest so that the bad guys don't know what you're up to, and also because you don't want to expose vulnerabilities and so forth. As you forecast forward, you're working with law enforcement agencies who have that kind of mentality. That has been pretty much the dominant approach inside the U.S. The people really understand the problem, don't tell anybody about it because they can't. Where do we go on this tension from your perspective? Do we go more towards an open architecture, or do we end up trying to quietly work behind scenes, essentially with professionals, to try to manage this concern?
But I think that your vision is, in my opinion, is a correct one, because you can manage both of the behaviors, in the sense that there are things which can be shared openly in full continuity between private sectors and law enforcement agencies. There are activities which, let me say, are probably preliminary ones, where we are aware that we have to provide information and then they have to make investigation. In the sense, when I said with a personal way of thinking, a living lab, I mean that in our systems we registered every day whatever you can imagine. Apparently are normal functionalities, but for somebody who is skilled and who is trying to follow a link, are useful information for analyzing and finding out if there is a structural crime behind. So at this point there should be a sort of a barrier. We can offer information and receive useful information. What's characterizing the law enforcement, of course, mine is a very superficial opinion, but you know that in Italy there are many organizations involved to cover this area, because there is the state police, there are Carabiniers, there is another institution which named Guardia di Finanza, finance, so we having a mission basically into the analyzing financial trades. And so it seems to me similar in the US. So my question is, what is going to happen between them? Because from our side, we at a certain point chose by law and by natural cooperation the Italian state police, because they, according to a law, an Italian law, they are in charge in this very moment for electronic crime. I don't know if the systems, the laws are so clear elsewhere, but sometimes I think that we have to think about a coordination between law enforcement agencies, which is not surely spontaneous and natural because of because they are minded in such a way.
Yeah. Okay. Finally, before I open it up here to the floor, if everything goes well, 5 years from now, given your vision, where are we at?
That's a very difficult question. I think that at least, and having had the pleasure of talking with you before this breakfast, in my opinion, that at least we will be able to react in a more structured way. I can't exclude that somebody who is continuously thinking about how to violate a site, a server, an infrastructure can't succeed sooner or later. The most important thing, and I think the future will offer us, is to react promptly, immediately, and to limit the damages. Because I am too convinced that you can't avoid totally the risk. You can't spend an enormous amount of money for protecting everything. This is a really tricky situation, because it's not only a question of having the right software countermeasure or the right hardware. It's a question of system integration. And when you talk about system integration, there is the human nature behind. Imagine in Italy, we are fancy, creative, but that's not so structured and well organized. I am allowed to say, because I am Italian. Probably, and so that it's unbelievable to think about everybody will be committed, because you convince, I convince you if you were Italian. Now, after 5 minutes, I have to tell you again in a different way, because you are, let me say, playing and interpreting what I said in your personal way, behavior. Imagine when we are, as in our company, 150,000 people. What is the effort? Of course, I do not talk with everybody every day, but with my first line manager, it's a disaster. At the end of the day, I have no more voice to convince them but not to convince, because they are convinced. But after 2 weeks' time, they change their mind or modifying slightly. And so, for having a perfect running system, it's the most difficult task.
But if we can do it in Italy, we can do it anywhere.
Thank you for...
I want to open it up now for questions. Again, the rules of engagement are, please identify who you are and also your affiliation. Who would like to begin? Yes, sir. Oh, we do have a microphone as well, even though a small group here.
Okay, good. I'm Edward Rothman from Guardsmark. At the very beginning of your remarks, you talked about how the internet had started out with anonymity, and that effectively with your SIM cards that you're working on with your phones, you're getting a certain degree of certainty of identity. Perhaps you could comment on the way that the internet is bifurcating between those areas where anonymity is vital and those areas where certainty of identity is vital.
hit and drowned, how do you say? Colpito is in Italian when you are in a ship, if you are hit by a torpedo and drowned, and that's true for me. Because, of course, what I think about, you can't give up freedom and then anonymity and whatever, but if you want to have a safe direction, you can access, for instance, the way offered by the postal operators to give them your email to be secure that nobody will read it. That during the transmission nobody would modify the text. That if it is growing an important kind of communication, for instance with a legal value, you need to know who is the sender, who is the receiver, what time it has been sent, what time it has received, and again you need a third party, a sort of notary, which can, apart of store the data, but for a legal purpose to show that really in that very moment Massimo Sarmi sent you an email covering, etc., etc. This is not, in my opinion, a contradiction. I think that we can maintain the freedom. We can send these continuously open postcards. You know, in the postcard there is a Rome representation, and the other side greetings from Rome, and everybody's reading. But if you want to send a closed letter, of course you need something more. Who is in the condition of offering this? In my mind, for instance, postal operators, but I do not exclude anything else, but on a voluntary base, I think. Another consideration could be, as to our activity, and while we are not able up to now to dematerialize the parcels, somebody will send sooner or later a parcel to a physical address. If we are able, and we have this data within us, to combine the physical address with the electronic address, at least we will offer a useful service. And, of course, this kind of functionality can be used for other purposes. For instance, talking about ID, you can have a unique code. In US, as far as I know, you have a social code. We have a similar form in Italy. You can have your identity guaranteed by your social code plus some other figures. Then, in my mind, there are many proposals that can be offered. But if I caught the sense of your question, always on a voluntary base, because we can't force anybody to give his identity. Then, of course, on the other end, we have to imagine that law enforcement agencies have to, let me say, monitor what's going to happen if something is generating troubles or a suspicion one. But for the normal way of proceeding, I think that anonymity in certain areas can be maintained. But if you want to cover more important features, it's better that you ask somebody, an authorized operator, a postal operator, to take care of that.
Another question. Yes. A microphone coming to you. Okay, thank you.
Alessandro Gazzini from Booz & Company. I'm interested to know that from a technical level, there's a lot of people working, professors studying, researchers on this topic. But what's your impression, and I would ask the question to both of you, from a political level, the level of maturity on this topic?
The professor is laughing. I am a pure student, and of course I'm very close to a professor, but frankly, it's simply, let me express my limited vision. I told in advance that, in my impression, the governments are starting to understand and to deepen what does it mean to protect critical infrastructure. They have no slightest idea of what's going to happen if you do not protect services. So are two different, I don't know how, because for me it's quite obvious. And another thing, I disagree when somebody thinks to leave the poor client, the surfer in the internet, alone, simply providing him the most recent antivirus software, or trying to train him to use the internet in a more proper way, because it can be left to the poor users. We are normal person, have so many activities to run every day. Imagine that you have to study at the university level. If opening the site, we have to pay attention. If connecting with a link, we run a risk of something else. There should be somebody else who take care of that. We can't leave the clients and the users alone. And that's it's up to the government to think about to deepen this aspect. It's not only a question of infrastructure. It's a question of guaranteeing the security of the services which are running over the internet.
I guess my short form would be to say that our leaders are first generationally challenged about this topic. Secondly, they're technically challenged. Most of the folks who are in the driver's seats of our organization don't have the kind of engineering background that we're talking about here. And probably most importantly, they're jurisdictionally challenged. They tend to think things only within a narrow set of functions or a narrow set of organizational span of control. The good news, I think, is that there is real recognition within, I think, the Obama administration that they have a problem. The challenge has really been trying to figure out how to manage it. And I think this is why this kind of initiative is so important. There's a lot here where I think too much in the US, we tend to want to be in charge. And the expertise, in fact, for managing these kind of problems are derived more by organizations, I think, like Poste Italiane, who have had sprawled across jurisdictions and been dealing with functions and these issues within a multilateral environment for a long time. There's a lot of expertise that we can get from there. And I'm happy to see that you're formalizing that kind of relationship, because my standpoint, we have a lot to learn. The next question. A shy crowd here. This is the nature of cybersecurity, I guess.
It's a very strange
right over here.
Jody Westby with Global Cyber Risk. Mr. Sarmi, I've done a lot of work with Carnegie Mellon University on looking at how boards and CEOs are viewing cybersecurity and governance of privacy and security. And our conclusions are pretty compelling that they're not paying much attention to these issues here in the U.S. at the CEO and board level. Have you talked with senior leaders in Italy, and are the business leaders, do they have the awareness you have about the need for protection of their networks? Do they even understand they are critical infrastructure?
Another good question, because again, covering 2 or 3 different areas, I start by considering the financial sectors. Typically, I am not so objective, and now probably somebody something from the heaven will drop, because of course I am in full competition with the banking sector. It seems to me that they are more willing to hide what's going to happen inside, and it's reasonable to understand this approach, because they don't want to say that, oh, somebody stole from your credit card a huge amount of money, because they would be in difficulty in terms of competition, that they will lose position. So it seems to me that in the banking sectors, they are maintaining all this stuff inside. Then to follow generally are not so culturally minded into thinking about networks, globality of networks, because they were used to have, let me say, a sort of infranet to cover all their clients' needs. And now with the internet, the things are changed. And so, in my opinion, the banking sectors have has to be more open than they are up to now, because I understand to protect this kind of information, but not integrating all the information, all the let me say the threats they suffer is a fault for the others, but for them too. So they have to cooperate. If you are talking about the other utilities, I think again that they are aware of the importance of protecting infrastructure. I can imagine who is providing energy, who is offering telecommunication services. But coming to the telecommunication services, they, and I told it in advance, are not minded in terms of security and privacy. I can say it because running the mobile services in Italy, when at a certain point the technology allowed to clone one mobile phone, we were in the 90s, and in practice you had your phone and another your clone talking all over the world, and the payment for that calls were on your bill. So immediately I understood what that meant in terms of security. Then there is another crucial aspect, which is privacy, because I remember at the beginning, one for legal reasons, the judges in Italy asked for having the printed records of the tracking the communication from a mobile to another one. I first installed some areas, protected areas, where the law enforcement agencies could access without violating or running the risk that somebody else will introduce and listen to your conversation if you have a lover somewhere else or something similar. So I think that again there is no this full knowledge of the risks we are running currently.
Maybe I could follow up on maybe the other side of the equation. We have in fact, downstairs, maybe folks pick it up on the way, but an article just out by General Wes Clark and Peter Levin on the warfare dimension of this. A lot of what you've been dealing with clearly has been the exploitation of the internet and various cyber activities to primarily around crime. But there is obviously a growing concern that this network will be used to either deny services, and obviously we have examples of this, but also to increasingly attack civilized nations. Is there a growing recognition that you're seeing within government and then within the broader sort of national security community about how important this issue is?
I think it's, of course, I do not consider it my first concern, because I am more willing to secure my clients' transactions. But I think that the relatively recent experience in European countries taught every government how important is this sort of new warfare. And I say again, I do not know what in practice and how in practice they reacted, but simply from talks, it's clear in their mind how dangerous is this new kind of threat.
We have time for, I think, a couple more. Yes.
Hi, I'm Mark Llewellyn from the Center for Naval Analyses. One of the challenges I see is the need not just to have risk management approach and equipment, but having the right people to implement it. There is a competition between the private sector and the government in this country on getting the very best IT people to run and manage the networks and the security. Are you seeing similar issues in Poste Italiano? And what sort of part of your management problem is getting the right people? Thank you.
No, I'm laughing because I hope I'll be able to express my feeling. Being under control of one of the several authorities running financial services, risk management is a normal issue. But how risk management in financial sector is managed according to the laws, to the international, European, local laws, to produce a lot of bureaucracy which hasn't anything to do with the real risk. So we call risk management a pile of documents, of forms were written, and a lot of people is involved, having simply the attitude to avoid risk for the members of the board, in the sense that if you filled this kind of application, if you maintain this procedure, if we wrote a thick paper about something, etc., everybody in the board is safe from possible incidents or something. That's not risk management. Risk management is a so serious task that apart from the fact that I'm not so convinced that we are skilled enough internally, but at least we have to convince these financial guys that risk management is not bureaucracy, because they are not technically minded and do not understand what's the risk, which are the basic rules to cover risk, how to protect the system, and they were able to transform in bureaucracy one serious thing, as you mentioned, risk management is.
Another question? Maybe as just a final one here is your agenda here in the U.S. What do you hope is going to happen in the very near term, I guess, over your visit here? You're going, you said, to sign an MOU with the George Mason University?
Yes. Tomorrow I'll be in Washington to sign this. For me, it's an important MOU because, again, we are putting together different, fully different experiences. That's a school of law, and we are an operational company. Mm-hmm. So it's very challenging and motivating for us to find out whether we are able to give a contribution. It's simply this our approach, and I think that we are overwhelmed in Europe by European rules, laws, under laws, and whatever. I hope that there will be, let me say, a lean set of rules which will be easily covered and introduced in each country. Otherwise, if you build up this enormous building of prescriptions, laws, and so else, at the end of the story, it's better not to have anyone. So I hope that with this cooperation tomorrow in Washington and in the near future with other entities, we will be really able to give a pragmatic contribution and approach to who is in charge of writing down the very specific rules and legal schemes.
Very good. Well, thank you. One of the objectives we have here at the Council with the corporate program is to get that level of sharing and conversation happening across the public-private sector and the academic sector and in the policy and business community here. And part of our hope is that we can inspire the kind of leadership that you're demonstrating. And we want to thank you so much for coming and sharing your vision with us today and the challenges, and also wish you well and hopefully be able to work with you as you try to tackle this very critical problem. Thanks, all of you.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching this Council on Foreign Relations video. For additional audio, video, and transcripts of CFR meetings, as well as expert analysis of international news, please visit us online at cfr.org.